How to make cornbread. Hmm?
Dad, what are you doing?
I'm making cornbread. Go back to sleep. The Nintendo Switch may be a versatile little piece of video game technology, but with that flexibility comes a certain level of risk. While this particular scenario may be a little too corny for you, the possibility of finding yourself relatably bummed is real. What should you do if you accidentally drop your Nintendo Switch in a pan of cornbread batter? I am here today to walk you through the recovery process and hopefully at least be able to restore-ish this cornbread OLED. The first thing that you saw me take care of immediately was powering it down. You don't want to combine moisture with electricity. After that, I wiped it off with some paper towels and I just let it set over the weekend, allowing the cornbread batter enough time to dry on here. We should be able to access this entire teardown with two bits. We're starting here with the main bit that we're going to use, a Japanese style Phillips 000 bit, as well as this Y00 bit for these two screws right here. We should be able to use a spacer here to run along the edge and kind of release the back part from the system. It feels like it's a little bit stuck, and that may be because of the cornbread batter. We're getting our first look at the inside here, and it doesn't look like it spread that far, although there definitely is going to be some detail cleaning we need to do. Let's switch our bits back and continue to take pretty much all of this apart. My goal with this project, like most of my videos, is to try to do this at a beginner to intermediate level of experience. I will leave some Amazon affiliate links for some of the tools and basic supplies that you might want to consider getting, but I'm trying to do this on a level that, again, is accessible as much as possible with as little as possible in the budget. We can release this kickstand with just a little bit of side pressure on the plastic that's holding it in place there. Our two Wi-Fi antenna wires here are conveniently held in place by this white tape, which, if we're careful, we should be able to reuse. I did get a slight tear in one of them. Both of these antennae are stuck down here with a little bit of light epoxy and can be popped off using a spacer or something plastic that will fit down inside of there. If you happen to be a guitar player, a medium to heavy gauge guitar pick would also work pretty great. Removing this shield now, we can see our motherboard. We do want to disconnect the battery as soon as possible now that we're in here. The daughter board plugs directly into the motherboard right underneath this rectangle here. We're going to want to be careful when putting that back together to make sure to line it up correctly. We have a hair. One thing I would recommend is replacing the thermal paste in here, which we will be doing. The back side of this heat sink is epoxied down in front of the fan, and we'll just lift that off of there. With this ribbon cable carefully removed, we will be 3 screws away from removing the fan. There we go. We have a number of ribbon cables in here that we need to make sure to carefully trip the gates before removing them. I also want to point out that occasionally you will see me using metal tweezers in order to reach and grab things, and that is something I will strongly caution if you choose to do that, to make sure that you don't damage anything inside of here. The tricky part about this is the front here where the USB-C connector for the power goes in. Need to pull back gently on the plastic down here on the bottom in order to pry that free. These rails could have been taken off earlier, but this is the point where I like to remove them. Be aware that this ribbon cable is lightly epoxied to the housing. It is possible to disassemble this further. For my cleaning purposes, I think this is as far as I need to go. But if you need to take out your battery and or screen, I would encourage you to look up another video on that, as I am trying to leave this again at that beginner to intermediate range. Back to our Y00 to take the back plate off of our first Joy-Con. We want to be careful when separating this, as there are 2 ribbon cables that connect it. Let's just disassemble as much of this as we can. And I'm going to end up leaving this single circuit board here that is for the buttons on that rail while we take the rest of the Joy-Con apart. This battery is lightly epoxied on here. I'm having more trouble than usual getting the battery connector to release, so I used my tweezers in there. Careful if you do that. Or better yet, just don't do that. I'm hoping that the visuals of what I'm doing is enough to communicate some of these steps. If I didn't edit this and make it a little snappier and quicker, this would be such a long video. 2 things I would recommend while following along. Number 1, keep track of your screws in some meaningful way. And number 2, I would recommend side by side with this video going to ifixit.com and searching for a guide on how to disassemble both the Switch OLED and the Joy-Cons. I tend to use iFixit guides even on systems that I have done before. I also have my video footage to look back over as I'm reassembling everything. And obviously you are welcome to use my video footage as well. But it will be critically important for you to keep those screws and parts and everything in some order so that you remember what goes where. I won't take the time to re-identify each screw length and thread as we put it back together. I'm curious if these joysticks are going to be salvageable. Some more light epoxy holding this down that we can just gently pry up. And I like to leave these parts all connected together. I see no reason to take them apart, and I find them to be a pain to put them back together, so we'll just get them out of the way. I think we finally have everything disassembled and we are ready to begin the cleaning process. I like to use warm water here with Dawn dish detergent just to help remove some of the grime and gunk. There's nothing magical about the Dawn dish detergent, it's just what we have, and it seems to do a pretty good job. As long as we wash and dry these pieces with the little bit of metal on them, I'm not worried about them rusting or anything. But I'm going to clean them first, get all this cornbread off of here. But before we continue with the rest of the clean, we will rinse and fully dry all of these parts off so the metal doesn't just stay on them. Ooh, I need to be careful. That is just lightly epoxied on there and I almost brushed it right away. It could be restuck on if needed, but I'd prefer not to have to do that. Okay, before getting to the rest of the pieces, let's just go ahead and rinse and dry off these parts that have metal components on them. Just gonna wipe it dry here with my microfiber cloth, and then I have an electric air duster that is great for drying this stuff off because it just throws air inside of there and can get down inside of all those hidden areas and make sure that we don't have water just sitting there. Alternatively, you could use a hair dryer on the cool setting and probably get about the same effect if you wanted to make sure to get areas like this good and dry after washing. Alright, I think we're good with that. Let's move back to the wash bin. I'm going to switch to a makeup brush, moving back to these small pieces, and probably use a toothbrush at times as well when I need a little bit stiffer of a bristle. One thing about cleaning these Joy-Cons in particular is the sheer number of little parts that we have to find and scrub, so I'm going to speed this up a little bit for you. Anything else hiding in here? Oh, I see one. Can we get it? It's hiding with the bubbles. Just a little silicone membrane for underneath one of the rail buttons. For help cleaning our electronic components, I am going to use some isopropyl alcohol. This is a 99% solution, and continuing to use a dry makeup brush here, as well as my dried out toothbrush, to help get in and try to loosen up this batter that has caked on here. But some of it has almost cemented onto this black plastic and metal, and I am using a spudger here to just kind of almost gently scrape away at it. I don't want to damage or scratch anything here, but it is helping me to loosen some of that stuff up that's just really coated on there. See that? That's the kind of stuff we're finding down in here. Okay, here's what the rail looks like when it's done, and we're just going to have to give all of these pieces a similar treatment. We don't want to cause any future overheating problems, so we are going to follow the recommendation of replacing the thermal paste. This old stuff can just be wiped off of here with a cotton swab. Easily one of the most difficult parts of this clean is going to be getting down inside of these ports. We have our USB-C charging port, and I'm going to take the pointy end of a spudger and just kind of gently start to try loosening this batter in here. A little bit of IPA on the end of my toothbrush, and back and forth we go, working at it and hopefully just continuing to loose that stuff up and get it. One product I use frequently and recommend is BW100. If you don't have this, make sure that you get some Safe for Electronics contact cleaner. And by spraying this down in here, I'm just trying to help kind of irrigate that stuff out of there that I have loosened up. This cover just kind of sits on here. I can remove it out of the way a little bit to clean it. We'll put it right back when we're done. And there we go. Same thing on this other side. Our cover can be removed or cleaned around. I think we're done with the motherboard. Let's set it aside. I'm going to remove this old thermal paste as well, but the most difficult part of this clean, on the heatsink at least, is going to be inside of this slotted airflow section that leads to the fan. This got all kinds of caked inside of here, so I'm using a dental pick here just to be able to fit something small and thin enough inside of each of these slots to start to work this stuff out. We're probably going to have to go over this a number of times and keep rinsing and scrubbing in between. And much better. With our little experiment today, our SD card reader and game cartridge reader didn't get anything inside of them, but the headphone jack is packed. I'm trying to use some of the bristles I have from a longer, stiffer cleaning brush. Moving on to our first joystick here, this is the part I want to be most careful with. I'm going to start by just kind of trying to push away at the visible surface batter here and get it away from there. As you look at yours, or maybe at mine, you can see there is a little plastic soft ring that caps over top of where you could get down inside of here. Right now I'm pushing that up with my brush and with my BW100 to be able to access inside of this. The thing I want to be careful about is not accidentally pushing some bits of cornbread batter down into the thumbstick itself. because that will cause it to malfunction. And typically, getting gunk down in there will cause the stick to drift, which is a common and frustrating issue with some of these joysticks. Being careful with the soft covering that's on top of these thumbsticks. I'm hoping that no cornbread batter got down inside of here, but I'm going to flush and spray it out as I would do any time I have these thumbsticks disassembled. We are ready to move on to our main unit here, our screen with its housing. I am spraying this with a gentle, safe for plastics glass cleaner, and I'm just going to try to wipe some of this surface gunk off of here with my microfiber cloth, again very gently because I don't want to scratch the screen with the crusted bits. I'll switch to my gentle makeup brush with a little bit of IPA on it just to try to get some of these more stubborn spots loosened up. If you have more skill or want to take more risk, you can take this screen out of here, as I've mentioned before. Some of this batter undoubtedly has settled down inside of this crack, and so I am going to try a method of just continuing to flush it out with the IPA on that makeup brush, as well as super gently running this very fine point of the pointy end of my spudger in there to try to loosen this gunk up. I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing so far in the areas that I have taken the time to get detail cleaned here. I think this is going to work just fine in this instance. I am just now coming to realize that there's one more section that we might need further disassembly to clean out. This slot for the speaker here has a bunch of this stuff caked inside of it, and I don't think we're going to get it from where we can access it on the outside. All right, let's take these speaker covers off of here and deal with this part. First, we have this bottom part of the housing, which revealed a few more areas that need cleaned, so we'll take care of that really quick. Then we are one screw and a little bit of double-sided adhesive away from taking the back off of here and seeing inside of this speaker cavity. I probably could have warmed this up a little bit with a hairdryer to loosen the adhesive, but I think we got it without ruining it. We'll just adjust this back on to where it should be with our spudger. Now we can pull the speaker itself out of here, and there is the cornbread batter. There's a little mesh covering screen on here that we can just brush off gently with our makeup brush and IPA, as well as gently with our spudger for the little stuck-on bits. And here's the batter down inside of the housing that we're just going to scrape and kind of push through there. And then we'll clean that out with our IPA as well, just like we have been with everything else. This little wire holder fell out of here, and I just want to note where it returns to. Getting that adhesive a little bit warm is helping us pull this up quite a bit easier. And I think we just about have it. There we go. We do need to put this back on here in the one spot that it tore, but it's okay. Okay, now one more speaker to clean. This one wasn't quite as bad on the speaker itself. This cornbread here is really caked in. I think probably because I tried cleaning it from the outside first and packed it in. So we'll just loosen it and push it through again with our spudger. There we go. I think we are actually finally all done with our clean. There is a little bit here of something that you can see, but it's actually not cornbread batter and I cannot clean it off. It's hidden at any rate, so I'm not worried about it. We have a little bit of surface wiping that we can do once we're done, but for the most part, I think we are ready to reassemble. I'm showing this because I made a little mistake when putting this back together by not getting that plastic ring down underneath this mechanism. That's something I'll go back and fix as I put it together. I'm noticing that this isn't setting here right, and it's because I didn't get that plastic ring underneath the mechanism earlier, so I went back and put that back where it should be, and we're good to go. These two buttons are meant to line up with two different shaped tabs, so make sure you get them in the right place. I accidentally trapped my right speaker cable under here, so I needed to back up a few steps in order to get that where it belongs. This K5 Pro is the recommended thermal paste for using inside of Switch OLEDs, and I will leave a link in the description for where you should be able to find some of this on Amazon. I want to push this on here in such a way as to try to spread it evenly underneath our heatsink here. Let's remember to gently line up the connector pins here for where this plugs in. I think we got it good. Now that we have pretty much everything else reassembled here, we'll reconnect the battery. A little bit more thermal paste on top of our heatsink, and then we can put our shield back down on. This wire tucks underneath this metal part here. I like using my tweezers to help guide my wire into the slots, but do be careful not to poke a hole through the sheath on the outside of the wire. A little life hack I've discovered that helps putting these buttons in here is to put the kickstand up so that we have a little bit of elevation to hold the buttons in place while we put that membrane down. Alright, we are all done with this project, and honestly, I am tickled pink with how it turned out. Not only did this system turn on and function properly, I took it home and played Metroid Dread for another couple of hours and it still works great. Obviously, we know that this scenario was set up, but it makes me feel good knowing that if something like this were to happen to me or you, we can recover from it. If you enjoyed watching me clean this, you may also enjoy watching what I did with the Nintendo Switch Lite sitting on my shelf right up there. I'll leave a link here at the bottom for you if you want to check that video out. In the meantime, thanks for hanging out with me, and we will see you next time. Not bad. It's a little dry.